You're listening to Drug Positive, the risk reduction and benefit enhancement podcast, reducing shame and stigma to save lives and end the drug war. Hi, everyone. I really hate that I have to begin my show again for the third time in a row with an apology for how long it's taken me to produce a new episode. But I've really been 2020'd hard. Since the last episode, I've had 3 people in my life die. My best friend from high school, Pat Welch, died in a motorcycle accident. My good friend and colleague, Kevin Zeese, who founded the Drug Policy Foundation and served on the board of DanceSafe for a while, died of a heart attack. And just a week ago, my stepfather died of COVID. And my mom also has COVID, and she's been in the hospital for the past 2 weeks. And for some unknown reason, which might be the COVID, right around the same time she got it, she lost virtually all of her short-term memory, and she can no longer care for herself. So for the past 2 weeks, I've been on the phone with doctors, nurses, lawyers, and her friends in England, that's where she lives, trying to manage her care. I've been talking to her every day, and it's tragic because when you lose your short-term memory, you can't grieve. Her husband died a week ago, and she keeps asking her nurses, "Where's Jim?" And she has to relearn over and over again, multiple times a day, that her husband died. And it's like she's being continually re-traumatized. I can't think of anything worse, and it's really affecting me. My mom has always been a smart, super competent, and highly motivated woman who took care of everyone around her. And now it's like she's in this horrible twilight zone hell of nonstop misery, and I feel helpless to do anything about it. The nurses aren't allowed to tell me what medication she's taking. She can't remember, obviously. All she does is cry and say, "What am I going to do? I can't live without him." It's awful. And because of the COVID, it's even worse because she's not allowed visitors. She's just alone in a hospital, crying and confused. Even the doctors who might be capable of assessing her short-term memory issues aren't allowed to see her. I'm not allowed to fly over there. Even if I did, I couldn't see her right now. She's got COVID. I'd have to quarantine for 2 weeks. So I feel helpless. Fuck you, 2020. You fucking suck. Hi again, everyone. So I recorded that about a week ago. I really don't know what I was thinking, how it would be possible for me to record an entire show in the state I was in back then. Maybe it was because I had started taking Adderall every day, and I convinced myself I could do it. I also convinced myself that I could manage my mother's situation better if I was taking Adderall, but it really just added to my overall stress. There was just simply no way I could record an episode in that state. Maybe I was feeling guilty that yet another month was ticking by without any new episodes. And I do feel a commitment to you all, my listeners. I really, really do. But anyway, I think I can do it now, and I'll tell you why. Because first, my mother's a bit better. Number one, she finally tested negative for COVID. And number two, her memory's been better the past 3 days. Maybe it was the COVID affecting her brain, but it also could have been this one medication she was taking. After fighting with her nurses for a week, I finally got a list of her medications, and she'd been on this Parkinson's drug called pramipexole. She doesn't have Parkinson's, but pramipexole is sometimes prescribed for restless leg syndrome, this condition where your leg twitches at night when you're trying to fall asleep. Anyway, as I was Googling her medications, all these warnings popped up around pramipexole about, I fucking kid you not, severe short-term memory impairment. Are you fucking kidding me? A 12-year-old could have discovered this about this drug, yet the nurses who were witnessing all these memory problems on a daily basis were giving it to her every night. So I called them right away as soon as I found this out, and I told them to stop giving her that drug and what I had discovered. And they told me they couldn't without talking to her GP. In England, a GP is a general practitioner. It's like a primary care physician in the States. I said, well, what about a doctor at the hospital? You must have doctors there. They said that the COVID ward doctors weren't allowed to make any decisions about anything other than her COVID treatment. Jesus fuck, right? So then I realized I had to talk to her GP. But for the past month, her friends in England had been trying to get a hold of her GP, and they just would never call back. My sister tried also about a week ago, specifically to try to get a list of her medications, and they wouldn't even put my sister through. Her own daughter. Everyone had been telling them that my mom had this sudden turn of dementia and that she needed to be assessed, but I don't know whether it was the COVID or just bureaucracy in England or whatever, but they wouldn't call any of us back. So I called and I told the receptionist that I was a doctor in America and that my mother was likely suffering memory impairment from a certain medication she was on, and that we'd been trying to get a hold of her doctor for a month, and that the situation was critical now, and that I want to talk to the doctor immediately and have him discontinue this medication. So it worked. So I had the same conversation with her doctor, but I added, didn't you know pramipexole has a common side effect of severe short-term memory loss? And why is it in England it takes a month to get through to a GP? So I was angry. I acted angry, and I was angry. And he did call. He discontinued this Parkinson's medication right away. So the next day, I called my mom. I call her every day, and damn it, she seemed a little better. And then yesterday, too, a little bit better. And I just got off the phone with her recently, and she's back. It's like I have my mother back. Her memory was fine. Now, it's too early to know whether this is going to last. Maybe it was the COVID. Maybe it was the medication, like I suspected. Or maybe she's just having a good spell, which can happen with dementia. It happened with my dad. I took care of my dad the last year of his life, and I saw good days and bad days. But either way, this pramipexole is contraindicated with dementia. You just don't prescribe that drug to someone who's experiencing dementia, especially if they don't have Parkinson's for some off-label use like restless leg syndrome. I stopped taking the Adderall, by the way. Can't fucking do stimulants every day. I've known that. My blood pressure was high. That's not good for me. That's back down to normal now, too. So drugs. Drugs, good and bad. This is a podcast about drugs. But look, if you've been following me, you know I don't compartmentalize my life. I talk about everything. So this is my personal life. But I'm telling you, as I always do, because it's who I am. And I wanted you to know, once again, why I wasn't able to put out regular episodes. But there are some drug lessons here. I mean, other than watch out for Adderall and high blood pressure, particularly when you hit middle age, there's also something obvious here, but I guess not obvious enough for my mom, who's a hell of a smart woman, and that is, don't ever let a doctor prescribe you a drug without researching it first yourself. You can't trust doctors to know everything about every drug they prescribe. New drugs are released constantly, and the doctors get pens and paperweights sent to them by the pharmaceuticals with the drug's name on them in order to convince the doctor to prescribe it. Yeah, for money. It's all about money. So if you wouldn't take a new research chemical without researching it, why would you take a pharmaceutical every day of your life without researching it? And I get it. Some people want to trust their doctors, and they don't trust themselves to know what the truth is about drugs, right? I mean, we don't have the time, right? They went to school, right? But even if you're not the brightest egg, please at least Google and read the top 5 links about the drug And if you see side effects that bother you, like severe short-term memory impairment, severe, at least ask your doctor about it. Say, hey, doc, I noticed a side effect of this drug you want me to take. And if your doctor says, I'm not too worried about that, then ask, why not? And if you don't get an answer that makes sense, you need to do a risk-benefit analysis for yourself. Is a twitching leg at night worth losing all your short-term memory? Is a night of cocaine fun worth dying because you didn't test your cocaine for fentanyl first? We're a drug-happy culture, and I'm not against any drug, as I'm sure all of you know. But you got to remember, pushers have an interest in getting you on their drugs. That's just capitalism. And to be honest, illicit drug makers seem far more ethical to me than pharmaceuticals. The N-bombs, for example, that have kind of disappeared, right? You can't even find them. So have many of the dangerous cathinones. When a recreational drug comes out and people start dying after taking it, we've seen this tendency for manufacturers to stop selling it. The darknet these days is almost totally filled with just the good drugs. You used to be able to get anything. Now, most of these markets have banned fentanyl. You can't find the N-bombs or many of these other dangerous drugs. Pharmaceuticals, though, they won't do that. They'll lie about their studies. They'll cover up the dangers. So with pharmaceuticals, you need to be even more vigilant. The cartels, of course, are an exception when it comes to illegal drugs, right? They're more like the pharmaceuticals than the small underground chemists I'm talking about. That's why fentanyl is still so prevalent today, more than ever, despite the darknet markets refusing to sell them. And many small-time chemists no longer making it because they realize it's too fucking dangerous, right? We still have giant Chinese labs selling to Mexican cartels and flooding the drug supplies with fentanyl. So test your fucking drugs for fentanyl, everyone. Go to DanceSafe.org for fentanyl test strips. Memory. Okay, memory. Memory is so fucking important. I remember when I saw Sasha Shulgin for the last time. I was interviewing him and Anne for my documentary. This is about 6 weeks before Sasha died, and he was struggling with dementia at the time. He had been for a while. I asked him what it feels like from the inside to have memory issues like he was having. And in true Sasha fashion, he rubs his chin, thinks for a moment, then looks up and says with a big smile, I can't remember. Sasha, the great lover of puns, couldn't resist the opportunity for a good joke. But here's the thing, and trust me on this, I've been talking to my mom now, who's back, remember? And I told her about everything that happened over the past month, and she was in disbelief. She didn't remember any of it. Yes, Mom, Jim died almost 2 weeks ago. Yes, Mom, you've been in the hospital over 3 weeks. And this may sound trite, but I'll tell you why it's not in a minute. When you lose your memory, you can't remember. You don't know it. When you lose your memory, you don't realize at all that you have any memory problems. And this is profound. You feel the same on the inside. You may be confused. You probably will be confused. My mom was very confused. But you have no clue that it's because of memory. In the throngs of my mom's short-term memory loss, she kept saying, what am I going to do? Over and over again. And I can't live without him, but mostly, what am I going to do? And this is so unlike my mom. She was kicked fucking ass. Her husband, for example, almost died of cancer maybe about 10 years ago. And when he was in the hospital having surgery with some chance of death, I was talking to her, and she was calm and coherent. We talked about what she would want to do if he died. She didn't want to come back to the States and live with me. She wanted to stay in England, where her friends were and her grandson is. And she was fine. I mean, she was calm. She would have grieved properly. But when her short-term memory was gone, she was just in a panic. And she herself didn't even know why. She just knew on some intuitive level that she was confused. I don't know what to do. And of course that was true, but she didn't know why. And when I would tell her it was her memory, she denied it. oh, everyone is telling me that, but my memory's fine. I mean, she said that to me. So when you're in it, you don't realize it. You won't be able to remember that you can't remember when you lose your memory. And what does that mean for us, you and me? Presumably, we don't have dementia yet, right? What's the lesson here? What's the difference between Sasha, who was his jolly old self, even though his dementia at the time I last saw him was worse than my mom's? And yet my mom was emotionally hysterical for weeks. What's the difference there? Okay, well, obviously my mom had just lost her husband and was relearning over and over again that he had died. That's terrible. Whereas Sasha had his beloved Anne right next to him, right? She was with him through the end. So you never know the situation you might find yourself in later in life, but which can affect things deeply. But still, I think there's a lesson here. There's something that we can learn about this situation, and something that gives us practical information. And so here's what I think it is. First, if someone you love gets dementia, what I learned from my mother in this hopefully brief situation, because hopefully it doesn't come back, and from my father who died in 2012 after a year-long fight with dementia, is that you need to meet your loved one where they're at. You need to do your own grieving as quickly as possible over the loss of whatever it was you were attached to in regards to your loved one who has dementia now. And then you need to realize they are still there. On the inside, no matter what's going on the outside, their consciousness is still there. They still feel themselves exactly as they were. And so you need to treat them that way. You need to treat them with respect. So for me, with my mom, that meant trying to make her happy and calm. I didn't want to lie to her that Jim was still alive, although I've heard in some long-term cases where short-term memory is gone, some families choose to do that. And that's okay, right? Because otherwise they're reliving this trauma over and over again. If you can't record new memories, that might be the best thing to do. But I just wasn't ready to write that off completely. It was too early. So I kept telling her, don't worry, Mom, I'm here. And you have tons of people who love you, and we're all going to help you get through this. You don't need to do anything. We're taking care of the funeral, and you're going to see Jim soon and get to say goodbye. A minute later, what am I going to do? You don't need to do anything, Mom. We're taking care of it all. I'm here. Your friends, we're all going to help you, and you're going to see Jim soon at the funeral, and you're going to get to say goodbye. 10 minutes like this or more, over and over. But she would calm down. When her nervous system calmed down, she would calm down, and she wouldn't have that panic reaction. I hope you never have to deal with this. I really do. But a lot of us will, because dementia affects more and more people. But like I said, I went through this with my father and now my mother. And while I hope with my mom it's just the COVID or the medication she was on, I really don't know. But the fact that both my parents might have some predisposition towards dementia, I've been doing a lot of thinking about what I can do now for myself if I get it, so I could be more like Sasha. And I do think there's a lesson here. Maybe it's just a small one, because there's a lot of unknowns, right? We don't have control over what is going to happen to us. But in general, I think the lesson in witnessing two people that I love have dementia and how they responded to it. Oh, and I love Sasha too. So 3, I actually was a friend of the families. I knew Anne and Sasha for a long time. I think the lesson is deal with your demons now before they come back to haunt you. And those demons are attachments. Literally, the things you think you need to live or to be happy. For my mom, it was her ability to take care of people. It was her intelligence. It was her competency. The hysteria she experienced around her husband's death every time she learned it wasn't because he had died per se. I'm 100% sure of this. Like, again, he had been sick before with cancer, and she was my strong mom I've always known. But because of her memory problems, she was confused, and she realized inside there, on a basic level, that she didn't know what to do, but she didn't know why, she didn't know how to do it. She was confused. She wanted to plan the funeral, but she couldn't, and all the myriad of other things. Who's she supposed to call? What's going to happen now? This is what was causing her panic. Again, she was always the smart and competent one and always took charge, and now she couldn't because of memory impairment. And it sent her into a panic, and she didn't really know why. So this, I think, is attachment. It's attachment to competency, attachment to being able to take care of people, attachment to your self-identity. I'm a tough bitch, my mom would love to say and laugh, you know. She still says that. She still likes saying that. What am I supposed to do now? Don't worry, Mom, we're taking care of it. And I'm telling my mom all these things now, right? She's back. I'm telling her all these things now, and you know, she's able to encode new memories, and now, you know, she wants to be a part of the planning for the funeral, and her friends over there, and the nurses and social workers who are helping to manage her care, they are involving her in these plans, at least a little bit, you know, now that she seems a little bit more capable, right? There's COVID. Like, you should only have 17 people at the funeral. It's too much money to hire a minister. So her grandson, who's 13, is going to give the eulogy. This is my mom telling me all of this today. Like, she wouldn't have been able to say a word of this. So, I have a lot of hope. She's back for now, and I have a lot of hope. But if she had remained unable to encode new memories, or if she reverts back, then I worry that she will be in constant distress again. So was Sasha somehow able to let go of his attachments? I mean, he was a brilliant scientist, right? Most people listening to this podcast know who he was, the godfather of ecstasy, inventor of 300 plus psychedelic drugs, including 2CB, the best fucking drug in the world. He was brilliant. And he lost his cognitive faculties. He could barely speak when I saw him last. Yet he mustered up a joke. And compare that with my father. My father spent months terrorized with the delusion that his ex-wife was having sex with the neighbors. He would stare out the window after he got his dementia. This is like probably 3-4 months before he died, so it was maybe less than a year into it. He'd stare out the window and think that he saw his ex-wife through the neighbor's window, right across the yard. Then he would demand that his home caregivers drive him over there so he could confront the neighbor. We told his caregivers from these care companies, drive him wherever he wants, but not to the neighbors' houses, because he's going to become rageful and go, and then what happened? He would become rageful against the caregivers. God damn it, I'm paying you money and you're not driving me, or blah, 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 over. And he would threaten them, and then they would quit. And we went through a number of care companies before we had to put him in an assisted living facility. And we really didn't want to do that, but everything really improved at that point because he didn't have all the triggers around his ex-wife. There were other people there to occupy him. But anyway, supposedly these delusions of infidelity are super common among men who get dementia. It's like there isn't any real personality type that distinguishes us. So for some reason, men who get Alzheimer's or other forms of dementia are very, very likely to start believing that their spouses are having affairs. And nobody knows why this is the case. Doctors don't know, but I think I do. I think it's attachment. When you start to lose your memories and your cognitive functions, whatever you're attached to will haunt you. It will become your demon. And that includes attachment to someone you love. In the end, we have to let go of everything, including and especially what we love the most. to the degree we're unwilling or unable to let go, I think determines how much we will suffer if we get dementia. So think about what you most fear losing. What is your most beloved? Your spouse or partner? Your competency? Your intellect? Your friends? You will lose all those things in the end. And when you do, you'll still be there. The same you've always been on the inside will still be there. And if you haven't let go of this stuff, if you haven't let go of your attachment to them, you will suffer. I'm 100% sure of that. So, if you want to prevent a constant state of suffering, if you happen to be one of the unlucky ones to get dementia later in life, get in touch with who you really are and dwell there. The more practice you do now in that regard, the easier it's going to be when you can no longer think or remember. Those are the lessons I got from my mom and my dad and Sasha Shulgin. Of course, we can also talk about the ways to prevent dementia, and I think there's 4 crucial things that we can do to do that, and I'll tell you about them in a minute. But first, I want to talk a little bit about my last episode on QAnon. Most of you probably listened to that. Maybe most of you listen in order. I don't know. Maybe people listen backwards on podcasts now. I don't know. Probably listen backwards, especially podcasts where there's a lot of them. It's more relevant, right? Recent stuff. Anyway, I want to talk about that last episode because there's been 3 people who have told me that they couldn't follow it. They just didn't understand it. And one of those people is actually a good friend of mine who I never expected wouldn't be able to understand it. He is a Canadian, though, so maybe he's not that familiar with American politics. And there were a lot of names in there of people, powerful people, politicians and whatnot, and a lot of young people today also. I just might not remember some of these things. I know a lot of young people listen to my podcast, right? So I just wanted to give a little summary and explanation of the last episode on QAnon. Which, if you recall, it wasn't about drugs. I took a little detour, unless you think adrenochrome is a real drug and that Democrats and celebrities are harvesting it from the brains of children to get high. But that's not the stuff I got into in this episode. The QAnon conspiracy theories is filled with nonsense, and that's the stuff most people remember and the stuff they like to debunk because it's easy, right? It's fun to laugh at these crazy theories and people who believe in such nonsense. But that's not what I was trying to do in my last episode. What I was trying to do is take your understanding of the QAnon phenomenon to the next level, because there is overwhelming evidence that QAnon is not a joke, but a deep state propaganda campaign, a psyop or psychological operation with the intention of manipulating people for political ends. And the first thing you got to realize if we're going to get anywhere here is that there is a deep state and there are conspiracies. If you're someone who thinks all conspiracy claims are nonsense and the government of the world's largest empire runs openly, like open source software, you're just foolish. And, well, I don't really know what to tell you other than read The Art of War by Sun Tzu, because it's never been that way. On the other hand, if you're someone who does recognize that some conspiracies are real, then the most important thing you need to know is that despite that being true, the majority of conspiracy claims are not true, and many of them, if not most, are intentionally designed to manipulate you. Disinformation is a staple part of geopolitical warfare. All major governments of the world today and throughout history have engaged in disinformation campaigns. They all have covert agencies that engage in information warfare and that release false narratives to manipulate and control both their enemies' ideas as well as the ideas of their own populations. In the U.S., the OSS, the Office of Strategic Services, was the covert agency during World War II. And they began mastering the art of disinformation against the Nazis, but also against the Soviet Union, who they knew would become an enemy once the war was over. And when the war did end, the OSS wasn't disbanded. They became the CIA. And they greatly expanded their covert work. And that means secret activities. That means conspiracy. It means things you hide from everyone, including Congress and the president. The Cold War was a hot war where the CIA paid and managed private mercenary armies around the world to fight so-called communism, but really any country that wanted to develop independently and didn't want to sell itself out to Western corporations and banks, regardless of whether they were allied with the Soviet Union or even had a big socialist ideology, they were deemed communist by the CIA and subjected to destabilization and many times an outright invasion. So even though to many of the people in the CIA, this was about fighting communism, to others, the smarter ones, they knew that this was really about directing the flow of wealth around the world into the coffers of Western corporations. So the Cold War was a hot war, right? There were actual guns on the ground, but they were usually proxy armies, not U.S. soldiers. But the Cold War was also a cultural and information war, including and especially here at home, where a growing socialist movement, workers' movement, a movement for fair and equitable distribution of wealth and power had to be crushed. And there were all sorts of ways in which these cultural wars were fought. For example, defunding left economics in universities and replacing it with identity politics. That's really what destroyed the left in the United States. Don't get me started. Today, what's considered the left is nearly empty of any economic analysis, and it's only about race, gender, abortion rights. Important issues, of course, but issues that corporations don't care about. They would rather keep us fighting over these cultural issues than organizing around a fair share of wealth and power. Hegemony requires controlling these narratives, and the CIA was and remains the masters of this. That's how empires form. It's not just luck. So there are many intelligence agencies, but the CIA is the central intelligence agency, and psychological warfare is one of their main specialties. And one of the ways they manipulate with disinformation is in generating cover-ups for their covert operations. From assassinations to engineering coups in third world countries, secret torture centers, experimental aircraft they're developing at Roswell, New Mexico, whatever. The CIA has always invented false narratives to cover up what they're doing, to lead independent researchers astray so nobody can figure out the truth and organize against it. This is just part and parcel of what they do. It's what they've always done. And starting in the 1950s, these false narratives began to take on the shape of what we might call today conspiracy theories. Kind of crazy narratives that on the surface seem silly, but if you mix a bit of truth in with them, then you can get some of the people to believe them. The idea is simply to disrupt and confuse anyone who's trying to prove that these assassinations and these things are actually not lone gunmen, but coordinated by the center of the empire. Whether, you're overthrowing a government or assassinating a world leader, what's important is not that everyone believed the official lie, like that said government was overthrown by its own people because it was a tyrannical government. That's not as important as just making sure that nobody can prove this, that the CIA orchestrated it. So the false narratives they began throwing out there, they didn't have to be all logical or consistent. They just needed to deflect, to make it impossible for anyone to prove the truth. Sending people down a rabbit hole, in other words, was effective enough. Some information warfare terms include honey traps, where you bait people with tempting answers in order to get them stuck in a dead end. False flags, where you blame an action on an outside entity. Limited hangouts, where you admit part of the truth in order to make another lie that's associated with that truth seem real. So these false narratives began to get crazier, and you didn't need everyone to believe them. You just needed to bait, tempt, and confuse enough people who doubted the official lies, the official story, so that they could never really know the real truth and wouldn't be able to organize an effective resistance against it. This, my dear listeners, was the beginning of conspiracy theory culture. And understanding the historical connection between covert warfare, disinformation, and modern conspiracy theory culture is crucial if you want to understand QAnon and why it's not just a joke. And this is why I spent so much time right now on this history, because despite conspiracy theory culture taking on a life of its own, which it does, QAnon began and is still managed right now by the covert agencies. And that means the CIA. And so in my last podcast with investigative journalist Robbie Martin, we prove that. We trace the recent history of the origins of QAnon to show how it began within the deep state. And the greatest irony here is that the QAnon narrative pretends that Donald Trump is fighting the deep state. And then the people who are against QAnon largely just go, ho, there is no deep state. So you have this little false dichotomy going on here, right? There is a deep state. There is a CIA that does information warfare. But Donald Trump is not fighting against them. He's working right along with them. Mueller never intended to find Russian collusion with the Trump campaign in his investigation. There wasn't any collusion. So what was it about? Just like, you may not know, if you listen to the last episode, you'll know this, but Mueller did the anthrax investigation, which was a total cover-up of the fact that the CIA launched the anthrax attacks. They tried to blame it on some lone guy, and he sued, and they won all this money. So in the same way, no wonder Mueller got assigned this job. His job wasn't to find collusion with Russia. His job was to cover something up. And that which begins the history of QAnon is the Hillary Clinton email leaks to WikiLeaks. The CIA gave those emails to WikiLeaks. They manipulated Julian Assange. And now they're blaming it on Russia. That's what it was all about. Anyway, this is all in my previous episode. And Trump's trying to pretend to be pro-Russia. Trump's pretending to be pro-Russia. Everything he's done since taking office has been against Russia. You want to know who the most friendliest president we've ever had with Russia, the one who did the most to create detente and end the Cold War in my lifetime? That was Obama. Obama was the pro-Russia politician and president that we had. Trump has been staunchly anti-Russia, but he pretends to be pro-Russia. This is a ruse, everyone. QAnon is a deep state psyop. And the other thing about it, the most important thing, the thing that's new in regards to QAnon, is that seemingly for the first time, conspiracy theory culture is being weaponized. It's the first conspiracy theory ever that is just attacking the left at every turn. It's fully partisan. It's creating an army of Nazi-style brown shirts who have already begun killing leftist protesters. So instead of just deflecting people away from covert operations like they've done historically, they're using conspiracy theory now as a weapon. They're manipulating masses of conservative or right-leaning people to hate everyone on the left as if we're pedophiles. All this is explained in detail in my last episode. Listen to it if you haven't already. I mean, what's happening today, people, you have to understand what's happening today is different than anything I've seen in my lifetime. It's very dangerous. And we need to understand it. And if you've already listened to the last episode, but you didn't quite understand it, I hope now with this little history lesson and summary, you understand. You can go back and listen to it again and you realize all the evidence is there. We need to take this QAnon thing seriously. And, I fully realize that what I'm telling you is that QAnon is actually a deeper conspiracy theory even than those who espouse it believe. And if you're one of these people who thinks all conspiracy theories are nonsense, then you probably think I'm even crazier than the QAnoners, right? Because my conspiracy theory is that QAnon itself is an even deeper conspiracy, blah, blah, blah. But you know what? I don't care. If you dismiss all deep politics, don't believe there's a covert arm of the U.S. government with more power than Congress or the presidency, and if you can't see the difference between milking children's brains for adrenochrome or other clear nonsense versus real conspiracies, then and you lump them all together, then just stop listening now and don't listen to my podcast again, because you're as much of the problem as the QAnoners. Believe me. And if you're a QAnoner, I hope I've at least got you to realize that not all conspiracy claims are real, that the government participates in manipulating conspiracy theory all the time, and that you need to wake up because you're being manipulated and being used as a weapon. And we could very easily see martial law and authoritarianism and all the things you hate come to pass. And just in case you really need to hear this from me, I just have to say it. Yes, Biden is part of the deep state too. The answer to what's happening is not the Democrats. Fuck, I didn't mean to spend this much time on this. Okay, I really want to talk about how to prevent dementia. I think that's important. And yes, psychedelics do play a role in it. And I'll talk about it now. But one more thing about why it takes me so long to create these episodes and how I'm going to try to change that. I really do appreciate all of you out there supporting me on my Patreon. And I really do want to honor you by releasing episodes more often. You really do deserve it. And I really want to do it. But so let me tell you what's going on with me and see if you can help me get over this hump, okay? Aside from the personal issues that are getting in the way, like my divorce a year and a half ago and my mom getting COVID and losing her short-term memory, I'm sure you're going to forgive me, for all those delays. But I've always wanted my podcasts to be evergreen. What that means is that in the end, like when I die, I want my episodes to still be relevant and important. I want people 20 years from now to still listen to it and get something out of it. And so if you go back and you look through all my episodes, not many of them have anything dated in them. At least until this last one on QAnon, right? Because QAnon's going to go away at some point, and then it's. But this desire of mine to create episodes that will be educational and enjoyable for generations to come makes producing an episode really fucking hard. I'm not like a lot of podcasters who can just talk about whatever for an hour. There's not a lot of chit-chat in my episodes. I recently learned that I'm on the autism spectrum, and I'm going to do an episode on drugs and autism, right? So I'm planning that whole thing out, right? Because I'm on the spectrum, that might be why I hate chit chat so much, and I hate listening to chit chatty podcasts. How do you like that? A podcaster who hates podcasts. I read all the time. I read nonfiction nonstop. I get into things. I want substance, right? Not frill. And that means information and emotional meaningfulness. I like humor too. Humor has its place, and some good comedians are a little chit-chatty, but my favorite comedians are the ones that have a lot of ideas that they talk about too. So, comedy has its place, and a lot of podcasts do that. But pointless verbalizing are just like, 5 people sitting around talking nonsense for an hour. Like, I just can't listen to that. And I never wanted my podcast to be that way. It takes me normally maybe 3 10-hour days to make one of my episodes. I first conceive of a topic, and then I'll find an expert to interview, or I know of the expert and I'll build the topic around that, right? Then, you schedule it, you do the interview. I like to interview for at least an hour and a half, and then I edit it way the fuck down. I'll spend an entire day, like a 10-hour day editing. And sometimes I rearrange, I'll remove things that just don't fit, and call me Aspie or perfectionist or whatever, but I'll take out all the breaths, the pauses, the ums and likes, and the knows, because I want it to flow fast. Because that's how I like to listen to things. Like, give me the content, give me the substance now, right? All those speech patterns that slow things down, I take them out. It takes me a full day to do it. Then, I listen to it again, and then I write my opening monologue so that it fits and it kind of teases the topic and it gets people into it. Then I wait a day and I reread my opening monologue because I want to make sure. Sometimes I find things I want to change. And then I record it. Then I drop it in front of the interview, which I've already edited. I use Adobe Premiere, by the way, more than I need to use, but I got used to working on that for my movie. Anyway, you get the idea. It takes a lot of fucking time. But here's the thing. This is the first podcast I've ever done where I just sat down and wrote a long monologue stream of consciousness. I'm not reading it exactly as I've written it, because I didn't even write it perfectly I just kind of wrote. It's weird when writing for a monologue. Like, I just wrote, what I want to say, and here I am. I'm kind of looking at it, reading it, and ad-libbing a little bit too. But this is the first time I just wrote something. I woke up this morning, I just fucking wrote it, and I said, I'm just going to read it. And I'm on track now to get this whole thing done in less than 6 hours. I wrote that first initial part about my mom and recorded it a week ago, but the rest of this, the vast majority of this, I've been sitting here. I wrote it for about, that's funny to say, I've been sitting here for about 3 hours, but now I'm reading it back. Well, okay, I finished it in about 4 hours, and now I've been, I can look at my recorder, 53 minutes. I've been here talking for 53 minutes. And so I'm going to get this whole thing done in 6 hours. And I didn't rewrite anything. I just recording it as is. So it's kind of an experiment. I want to see if this format is something that will work for you, my dear listeners, and especially my Patreon subscribers. So I want to ask you, if you've gotten this far in this podcast, and if in the end you like this episode, and you want me to do more of these freeform style rants, let me know. Tell me, because I might be able to do this weekly. I can't do those big ones, the heavily edited ones with interview subjects and all that, the evergreen ones. I can't do those weekly, but I might be able to do this. I might be able to provide you with more steady content. So let me know. Email me at drugpositive@gmail.com or Facebook message me. It's not hard to find me on Facebook. My last name is Spherios. Or post a comment on my YouTube channel or on the podcast page itself. But easier is just drugpositive@gmail.com. Don't use Instagram. I have a drug positive Instagram, but I don't use it much. I know, I'm getting old. I need to use Instagram more than Facebook. I do want to make that switch. I just don't know how to quite do it yet. Anyway, contact me and let me know. Okay. Again, thank you to all my Patreon subscribers, and especially my newest subscriber, Dan, who's pledged $200 a month. I want to cry. Thank you so much, Dan. We will talk again soon. and Zeese, who's pledged $50 a month. Zeese, I owe you a few video chats already. I'm so sorry. You have my number. Call me anytime. Let's set it up and do it. Okay, let's get to the final section of this episode. The 4 most important things you can do to prevent dementia. And one of them is take drugs, but it's a little more nuanced than that. And yeah, I do know there's a lot of young people listening to my podcast, and you may never have thought about dementia. This might be boring for you, but trust me, it will impact your life someday. Also, the habits you get into right now are going to protect you. They're going to make it easier for you to do when you hit middle age, which is really the time you got to start doing these things to prevent dementia. So don't think this shit doesn't apply to you. All right. If you do these 4 things, you will significantly reduce your chances of experiencing dementia later in life. I know this to be true because I've studied it. And I'm on the autism spectrum, and people on the spectrum don't stop researching a topic until they've exhausted every angle and categorized all the data into a properly labeled little boxes with arrows that point to all the other related boxes, and cross-referencing everything and all claims to make sure they're valid, and doing scientific experiments to test their validity, etc. So there's no doubt whatsoever. Okay, I'm not so sure everyone on the spectrum does that, but that is what I do when I do research. You can ask anyone who's ever dated me, my ex-wife, anyone, how they can't even, I don't even hear what they're saying when I get into a topic. I just start, they can shout my name and I don't even hear it. That's an ASD. That's a gift, actually. That's one of the positive sides of being on the spectrum. There are a lot of positives. Anyway, so I did a lot of this research back in 2012 when I was taking care of my father during his decline and passing. And then I've been back into it again these last 3 weeks, like reading tons of new stuff, because of my mom. I've even been neglecting my DanceSafe work because of doing all this research. But anyway, don't trust me. Do your own research. Corroborate everything you hear. Trust has a place, but it only goes so far, right? You can figure out who's more trustworthy over time, when you get information, and you can lean on those people. And, if you lean on me for some information, thank you. That's a sign of appreciation, and everyone likes being appreciated. But don't trust me or anyone completely, because people make mistakes. Doctors will prescribe you the wrong medications. Q tells you bits of the secret truth with wallops of lies and disinformation. So you have to think for yourself, even everything I tell you. I believe these things are true, but even I could be wrong. But here it is. Okay, the 4 most important things in my research that you can do right now to prevent dementia later in life. Not in any particular order. Number 1, exercise every day, especially cardio. Number 2, eat fewer carbohydrates and more good fats. Number 3, challenge yourself cognitively by learning and doing new things you haven't done before. And 4, take psychedelics regularly. Now, I'm going to elaborate on all these things to try to convince you why they're important and why this isn't bullshit. And I'm not going to charge you any money for this. I'm telling you this because for my entire life, I've been the kind of person who learns and teaches. You can ask my high school friends. It's just my nature. I love communicating knowledge, absorbing it, and giving it away. In fact, that's my attachment. So I actually have been practicing letting go of that, because I know there will come a time when I won't be able to communicate anymore, where I won't be able to learn anything nor share what I've learned. I might be dead when that comes, maybe that's being lucky, but I also might be alive with dementia when that time comes. And I'd rather end up like Sasha than my father. Okay, first, exercise. Some of you might say this goes without saying, but nothing goes without saying. Why would you know exercise prevents dementia if nobody explained it? So here's why. When you move your body, you get the blood flowing. It flows faster. Your heart beats a little faster to get the blood flowing into the muscles you're moving. in order to carry the energy and nutrients and oxygen into them to feed the cells so that they can keep doing that movement. Every muscle you move affects your heart rate to some small degree. But when you move your body a lot in such a way that your heart rate goes way up, the blood flows a lot faster. And it flows a lot faster in your brain as well. This carries more oxygen to parts of your brain that don't get that much normally. And this causes new electrical signaling in your brain because neurons fire that don't normally. And the pattern of firing is stronger. This is why you experience new thoughts when you do cardio exercise. The new thoughts just come to you. You don't even have to try to think about them. Everyone who does cardiovascular exercise realizes this. I've been a long distance runner my whole life because of this very phenomenon. I mean, like, it just changes you. It gets you hot. I feel amazing. I get creative. I have new thoughts. And for hours afterwards, I feel better. And if I don't run for a while, I start feeling depressed. My brain doesn't work. Even if you don't experience depression, you're still going to strengthen your brain when you exercise. One thing about cardiovascular exercise people forget is the vascular part. They think it's just about strengthening your heart, but it's not. It's more than that. The vascular part is equally, if not more important. Your blood vessels carry oxygen and nutrients to every cell in your body, and as you age, the small capillaries are the first to go. They get old. They can't carry the blood as easily. Those are the smallest blood vessels that carry your blood to the farthest, hardest to reach parts of your body. Not just your toes, but the deepest regions of your internal organs, including your brain. And you want to get blood in there. You want to carry those oxygens and nutrients in there so that they can replicate themselves and do all the functions they need to do. Cardiovascular exercise will help prevent not just dementia, but cancer and other sucky diseases that result from cells dying in your body. So exercise. Number 2, eat fewer carbohydrates and more healthy fats. Our species has been around for maybe 250,000 to 300,000 years. And that wasn't even the beginning of us. Our pre-Homo sapien ancestors evolved for millions of years prior to that. And that's still us evolving. And during that time, millions of years of our evolution, we hardly ate any carbohydrates. It was only about 5,000 years ago when agriculture formed that humans started eating grains in any quantity. And it's only been the last 100 years, especially in the West, where carbs are almost the entire diet. Sugar and fruit and grains, cereal and pasta. This has resulted in a diabetes epidemic and, yes, a dementia epidemic too. Why? I'll tell you why. There are only 2 types of energy that our cells can use. I'm talking any and every cell in our body. And that's carbohydrates and fats, or to be more precise, glucose and ketones. Whatever carbohydrates you eat in whatever form, before they can enter any cell in your body, they have to first be metabolized into the simplest carbohydrate of all, glucose. Then, with the help of insulin, the glucose can enter the cell. But take note, why did we evolve to need a helper chemical to get glucose into our cells? Our pancreas produces insulin in order so the glucose can pass through the cell wall and get into the cell and give it energy. Why did we need to evolve a whole new organ to help the simple carbohydrate get in and give us energy? Why don't our cells just allow the glucose in on their own? Well, there's a number of reasons for that, but one of them is we didn't get our energy from carbohydrates for millions of years. We got them from fats. Fats get broken down into ketones. They get metabolized into ketones, which enters the cell without needing insulin or anything else to help it. And this is where 99% of our cellular energy came from for 99.9% of our evolution up until the modern industrial world. Carbohydrates were consumed in such rare amounts throughout our evolution that really the pancreas evolved to produce insulin, not so much to help that glucose get into our muscles or our neurons or into the cells that we need to function to do our daily activities. We already had enough ketones from fat to do that, to function. Rather, the insulin helped the glucose get into our fat cells for storage. Carbohydrates, when we did consume them during evolution, became fat in our bodies. And then at times when we couldn't get enough fat from, say, eating meat, that stored fat in our bodies was released and metabolized into ketones, which then entered our muscles and our brain cells, et cetera, and gave us energy for our daily functioning. The keto diet is a diet high in fat and low in carbohydrates. And I'm on it. But you don't need to go to any extreme to lower the amount of carbohydrates you eat. You really just want to get most of your energy from ketones, from fats, healthy fats, rather than carbohydrates. So you don't really need any carbohydrates if you eat enough protein and fat, but you will die if you eat only carbohydrates. That should tell you something. So anyway, what you want to do is lower your carbohydrates and at least get a substantial amount of your energy from ketones. Also, and here's where the dementia comes in hard. The brain prefers getting its energy from ketones. The ketone diet, in fact, was developed for epilepsy. It avoiding carbohydrates prevents seizures as good or better than any anti-seizure medication on the market. When you eat carbohydrates and it turns into glucose and floods your blood, your body releases insulin to send that glucose into the cells for energy, including your brain cells. But sometimes, though, sometimes that can induce seizures in susceptible people. But sometimes, too much insulin remains, and when your insulin sends all the remaining glucose into fat storage, at that point you become sluggish, physically and mentally, because you don't have any more glucose around to feed your cells, because your insulin had pushed it all into fat, and you don't have any ketones around because your body is not in the habit of breaking down fats for energy because you've been eating carbohydrates all the time. And so this mental sluggishness is literally the result of your brain's neurons not able to function because they have no energy. If you were getting your primary energy from ketones, however, if you were eating enough fat and not that many carbs, then you'd always have enough energy to feed your brain, because that's how ketones work. Those energy molecules don't get sucked up and put into storage. So anyway, I'm not really here to try to promote the keto diet. I like it. It's good for me. It's not good for everyone. But in general, eating healthy fats and eating less carbohydrates is good for your brain. The lack of energy in your neurons is also just one way in which a high-carb diet contributes to dementia. The other is diabetes, and that's even worse, and it's very highly correlated with certain types of dementia. Type 2 or adult-set diabetes results when your cells, having been bombarded with insulin so much because you're eating carbohydrates all the time and getting all your energy from glucose, you become tolerant to the insulin. The insulin your pancreas releases constantly to try to soak up all of this glucose, essentially it desensitizes the cells of your body. And it doesn't work anymore. And now you have excess sugar in your blood. This is diabetes. And that sugar can directly damage blood vessels in your brain and result in a type of dementia called vascular dementia, which is part of my father's dementia because he wasn't controlling his diabetes well enough. Okay, number 3, challenge yourself cognitively by learning and doing new things. Your brain is a muscle, right? You've heard that before. Use it or lose it. Specifically, what this means is that the electrical activity in your brain strengthens the neurons those electrical impulses pass through and actually grows new ones. When a neuron receives chemical signals from nearby firing cells, they will also grow new dendrites in order to receive more of those chemical signals, right? Those neurotransmitters. This is called dendritic sprouting. The sprouting of dendrites increases neural connections, allowing that cell who grew those new dendrites to receive neurotransmitters from other nearby neurons that it couldn't have reached before. Literally, connections weren't there. So the number of interconnections grows whenever these electrical impulses take place. And they take place more when you do new and different things you've never done before. So if you only do the same thing over and over again, then you're just strengthening the neurons required to do those same things, and the others will atrophy. You need to do new things, challenge yourself, learn new and difficult tasks in order to strengthen the parts of your brain that involve themselves in learning. Learning is memory. So crossword puzzles, learning to play a new instrument is really good. Doing new physical activities like snowboarding, or maybe your bad knees, you can't do that. But learning to juggle. So even physical learning, it strengthens your brain. But just memorizing lists of words can do it too. But that's pretty boring, right? You want to do some new, learn some new activity, do something that's a little more fun. But that would work. So you get the idea. Use it or lose it. If you're doing the same thing every day, if the tasks required of you are easy, happening from muscle memory only, and your mind just wanders, if you just watch TV all the time passively, your neurons, especially as you age, are being culled. I don't know how to say this any differently. They will die. They actually shrivel up and go away. And lastly, and the most important one, well, no, there's no particular order. The most fun one, take psychedelics. Take them often. Take them in different contexts. Take smaller doses more frequently, but every once in a while take larger doses too. Studies have shown that serotonin agonists, basically the psychedelics, stimulate dendritic sprouting in the same way learning new tasks does. Why does this happen? Probably because the serotonin 2A receptor, which is activated by tryptamines and phenethylamines, is mostly excitatory rather than inhibitory, which means when the psychedelic is bound to it, the 2A receptor increases the action potential of that cell. That means that cell body is more likely to fire an electrical signal because the activated 2A receptors are saying, yes, do it. They are excitatory. Psychedelics cause neurons to fire that don't normally fire without them. Neurons are involved in sensing, but also interpreting, feeling, but also thinking and integrating. So like exercise and blood flow, like forcing yourself to learn new things, psychedelics force you to feel, interpret, and think new things. They strengthen and increase neural connections. We know this. We know this from studies, from the psychedelic renaissance over the last decade or so. And maybe, just maybe, they also help you learn non-attachment. And there's nothing like having your mind and identity blown open from a challenging LSD or psilocybin trip to get you to see things differently and stop clinging to who you think you are and what you think you need, right? These challenges can be frightening, but if you move through them and don't resist them, you just might learn that you are not your thoughts or emotions or your memories, and you don't need anything. You are pure consciousness that exists behind all of that. Could that be why Sasha Shulgin was not afraid, despite his mind's early departure? Rest in peace, Sasha, and hang in there, Mom. I want to come visit you when this pandemic is over. And thanks for listening, everyone. And don't forget to email me at drugpositive@gmail.com and tell me if you like this new format. Should I keep doing more episodes like these? I won't stop doing my Yeah, more serious ones, I guess. But these are a lot easier. So, write and let me know if it's worth recording more of them. And finally, this episode is dedicated to my mom, obviously, but also Cody Jones, Victoria Clemente, Cheryl Ananda, Becky Crew, Casey Hardison, Eric, Greg, Lori, Jen, and Marigold. You should all know why I'm dedicating it to you. Much love to you and everyone out there. All right, bye.